please welcome the final team on stage under the Rise to Scale segment for presenting their paper titled Social Vibes and Cultural Fields for Gen Z from Hangouts to Cannes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dipesh. I'm representing PepsiCo along with my colleague Siddharth and Smriti from Incognito Insights. And we're going to talk about, the paper is called Social Vibes and Cultural Fields. Now, I'm getting great vibes from this room. It's always good to meet old friends and colleagues. So all the more the reason for us to actually talk about vibes. And I'm going to talk about the second most important or the most famous, the term in the room that has been discussed, which is Gen Z. After AI, that's Gen Z. So Gen Zs are the voice of today, right? We can't avoid them. They are the first adopters of digital technology. In fact, they are the digital citizens, if I may say. They are the citizens of the world. The trends actually transcend into them so seamlessly. It was very difficult for us millennials as well, but they are actually very naturally born with it. They're always connected. They know the trends. They know everything that is there. I heard in the previous terms about dual screen. Here is the problem at 5 screens as well. And they communicate with images. Everything that happens goes on to the Snapchat thing, and you don't even know what you've actually done in terms of, probably starting a streak or something. So I'm going to now hand it over to someone who's much more closer to it. So my colleague Siddharth, sorry, I should use the word Slate. So go Slate, just Slate.
Are you able to hear me? Am I audible? Yeah, okay, cool. So I think the idea was that as we were trying to understand Gen Zs, there was a conversation where we were sitting and we were hearing some phrases that we have not heard before about our brands. Somebody called our brand Dank, somebody said W, and I was then trying to understand what is really happening. And this is something where we actually stood back to say that, there is an interaction style of Gen Zs which we don't fully understand. And hence, we need to actually be more culture forward in terms of what we are really trying to understand about Gen Zs, and hence create our own ways to doing things. Therefore, we looked back, lots of data that we existed, a lot of work that we were doing at that point of time, made us think that there are 3 cultural facts which exist with Gen Zs. First, they look for collaboration, they look for interaction. Second, it's the vibe. The vibe is extremely important for them. If it's not in their vibe, they're not going to get interested in it. And third, make it fun for them. If it's not fun for them, they are going to get disengaged very, very soon. But as they were talking to them, what struck me was, are we listening to them? Are we listening to them in the way that they are talking to us? Look, if you reflect back on some of the ways that we are working with them, our ways seems to be slightly different than what they would have expected to be. The way in which we are engaging with them, we get guarded responses to some extent. The engagement levels, the fun element, I'm quite sure if all of you think of the fun element, let's say in a focus group, we'll sort of have different opinions on that. And the spontaneity element is also very, very limited. So I think the idea for us to come here and share this with you is more to actually take a first step in some ways to actually inspire all of you and uplift to say that, do we need to do things differently? And in this journey, we had partnered with Smriti from Incognito Insights to sort of create some methods and technologies together with us. So Smriti, if you can just...
Thanks, Sid. So like Sid said, right, I think it's not about force-fitting the traditional methods that we've all been used to in terms of how we do our focus groups. I'm talking about offline because, yes, online, Gen Z, you can still interact with them. But how do you get them to talk to you offline? And how do you get them to participate? Because we know it's based and rooted in their very psyche and very cultural nuance of being collaborative, right? They want to own the discussion. They want to be a part of it, don't want to be talked to. And that's where the first thing comes. A Karen like me, I'm very happy to accept, who's a middle-aged woman, maybe a good moderator, great researcher, but cannot get you talk and talk to me like you would talk to your friend. And that's where this idea came to us that, hey, why don't we get one of their own group, own person, own friend to actually become the lead moderator? Now, we all would probably raise a brow saying, hey, moderator does need a lot of training, boss. What are you talking about? But I'm not talking about here a moderator who's going to be a professional moderator, but somebody who could steer the conversation, somebody who could introduce a topic, somebody who could lead the way. And that works wonderfully because you suddenly see that the guardrails that all these youngsters have drop, right? And you start seeing a very natural conversation that starts flowing in, and people start automatically on an autopilot discussing any kind of topic that you would think that is not even open to discussion. The other interesting thing we did is that instead of really trying to make it an interrogation, because, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you, I see quite a few Gen Zs here as well, which is great for market research industry. But even at home, I'm sure many of us have Gen Zs or Gen Alphas, right? And how many of us can honestly have a conversation with them? We can't, right? How was your day at school? How was college? Yeah, it was good. And they go into their room and shut the door. So how do you get a conversation with this generation? The best way is to make them participate. And how do you do that? By actually taking a lot of gamification to them. So instead of having a question and answer session with a long DG that keeps going on and on and on, and they're bored to death, why don't we bring in some kind of tools like Pictionary, Taboo, right? It's all question and answer. Taboo is fun. I don't know how many of you have played it, okay? And also things like implicit associations, where it's a lot of tapping into the subconscious and trying to understand through various means, how can we really understand what they mean versus what they're telling us, right? And the other interesting thing we did here is that we took the venues to them. So not calling them in a place like this, or in a nice, old, one-way mirror setup where they are being watched, right? So we got the venues to them in their cafes, in their college campuses, and started to have a very casual chat rather than having a focus group discussion. And trust me, the discussion went on for 2 hours long, and we had to stop them. Then can we just wind up now? Because I think we got what we wanted. So these kind of tools kind of get you to connect with Gen Z in a very authentic way, where they feel that, I'm contributing to the brand. And most of the times, if you've really met a Gen Z and in a research setup, they will ask you, why should I tell you this? What are you going to do with it? How many consumers ask us that? They never used to ask us before. They will just give us an answer and go, right? But they want to know what are you going to do with it? Because they want to be part of that process. They want to own the process. And that's where we got this idea that let's try and understand sustainability. Of course, Sid will talk more about it. But sustainability, again, it's a very abused word. I think all of us, if you ask in a very stated manner, will say, yes, we think a lot about sustainability, but it'll be really interesting to see what are the sustainable goals that the Gen Z is really worried about, right? So Sid, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. So I think what we'll try and do is we'll try and share with you some of the key findings that we had, which actually created some campaigns for us. And just for everybody to know, some of these campaigns actually went to Cannes and won some awards. So let's look at peer moderation and how does it result with consumers. As part of the process, we actually gave consumers some facts which are very contrary to what they believed. Now, in cases where peer moderation was done, what we realized is that consumers were a lot more raw to their response. They're a lot more authentic to their response. There was no pretentiousness. There was no saying that, hey, I know this, or I knew this, I forgot. They were actually a lot more open, a lot more vulnerable. If you read some of the quotes, one of the consumers said, "Hame to pata bhi nahi tha. I didn't even know something like this existed." These tonalities, these aspects that were coming out from those discussions, those aspects actually became the tonality of the campaign. Those aspects became the content creator for the campaigns. And this is how we actually created the campaign on a particular topic, which was a lot more empowering in its tonality. Let's look at the example for the gamified project tools. When we created a list of sustainability initiatives and we showed it to consumers, and a general probing discussion happened, all of them said that these are great initiatives. We need all of them. We need our whales under the sea to be secure, and we need our communities, societies to be secure. But when we applied implicit testing-based rules and the monopoly game-based decision rules, we realized that there is a certain sense of hierarchy to all of them. Gender equality, sustainable communities are actually a lot more important to Gen Zs than environmental friendly or responsible production practices. This hierarchy helped us understand what is the right anchor to put in our campaigns. Should the campaign on a farmer be on sustainable ways of production, or should it be on gender equality? And then the last, which is on the third element that we had, which is taking the venues to the consumers. This is an output, some drawings which consumer made. We made them play Pictionary with us in a cafe right outside their college. And if you look at the depth in which some of these detailed out things have happened, it surprised me. There were mention of financial burdens. There were mention of rainfall shortages. And something which was really interesting was they had made this tool. Most of them who made this tool didn't even know what it is called. But they called it, but when I told them, they call it, this is a tool which we recall when we see a farmer. But it's actually a sickle. But that's the power of this. This gives you a creative element to take forward and actually create a campaign which creates and has those elements that consumers can resonate with. So to conclude, I'll just say that these were some of the campaigns that we had taken forward. They've had the journey of their own. But I think with consumer centricity in the center of them, with a lot more thought towards how do we go about it, and with the brands that aim to bring smile to consumers' faces, I think we got these campaigns out. And I think at this podium, we would like to request all of you to start thinking about methodologies, not from experience forward of what we have done, but more culture forward or today what we are seeing. With that, I'd like to conclude. Thank you.
We have one question. Is this methodology applicable for Gen Zs even from tier 2 and tier 3 towns? Do we see any cultural or social differences between these sets of consumers?
Should I take that? Okay, that's a very interesting question. Yes, I mean, you'll be surprised that Gen Zs, thanks to the digital evolution that India has gone through, they somewhere converge a lot than other generations when it comes to even lower tiers. So there are very similar aspirations, very similar way of behaviors. Yes, the cultural nuances are different, so you all also have to try and see how do you change some of these methods and adapt them to a rural setup or to a tier 2 setup. But typically, I would say the difference, broad difference that I've seen is that I could do this in a metro by having men and women groups together. Like I could mix them up. I could mix the Gen Zs together. I mean, they work very well. But in a smaller town or a smaller tier, that will not be something that I would recommend. So that's the only change, but otherwise these kind of hangout sessions and the way you interact with them pretty much is all pervasive.